There was a study done on rats. They were given a lever in which when they hit it, a chemical would fire off in their brain. This chemical was so addicting, so pleasurable, so enticing that they didn't want to do anything else but hit the lever. And so they did. That chemical felt so good to them, it overrided all their needs to eat and drink. And in pressing that lever over and over and over again, they died. You are not a rat, but we have that same chemical within us, and it's dictating a lot of your behaviors. That molecule is dopamine. And in this video, we're gonna dive deep into how modern society has hijacked your reward centers and what you can do about it. Because if you want to become the 2.0 version of yourself, if you want a life that you're proud of, that you're happy, you're fulfilled by, you need to get control of this one thing. The way the modern world is looking, it has control over us. Now, credit where credit is due. Most of the research I am pulling from in this video comes from Dr. Anna Lembecki's amazing book, Dopamine Nation. So if this chemical dopamine is controlling our life, what does it look like? What does it do? Be it sugar, sex, social media, the response in your brain is the same. It fires off a cascade of feel-good neurotransmitters, dopamine being one of them. Your motivation is completely dependent on your relationship to dopamine. Having a healthy dopamine balance will increase your alertness, productivity, concentration, motivation, and happiness. It can even cause feelings of euphoria. You might be thinking, dude, this sounds awesome. How can I hit the lever like the rats? I want that all day long. Well, the downside is it's very possible to have too much of a good thing. When you look at addictions, dopamine plays a massive role. Just like the rats got addicted to pushing the lever, we can get hooked on things in life. And just like addicts will build up a tolerance to their drug of choice, you will build a tolerance to whatever is secreting dopamine in your life. The scary part here is that leaves you needing more of what makes you feel good. Gambling addicts increase their tolerance to the bets they make. Feel that same rush. Smoking, nicotine, something I struggled with in the past, you need to increase the amount to feel the same rush you did when you started. And if this is left unchecked, eventually you reach a point where the thing that made you feel good only makes you feel not bad. We consume so much dopamine in the modern world that it depletes and diminishes your neural pathways with dopamine. The side effect of depleting your dopamine levels are lack of motivation, lack of self-love, lack of intimacy in relationships, and even depression. And if the modern world feels different to you than it did 5 years ago even, it's because it is. You probably don't need much research to understand and just feel into this that we've all become instant gratification machines, myself included. I'm not immune to this. Just look at content. It's gone from consuming 20, 30-minute videos, 10-minute videos, to now even 60-second is too long. We need a video below the thing we're watching to even keep our attention on a 30 to 60-second video on TikTok. And what we're talking about is how easy it is for us as humans, because we're all wired the same way, to go after things that give us a short temporary rush of this chemical that feels amazing, feels on fire. But what goes up must eventually come down. And that's why you feel a crash after you indulge in some of those activities. I wanna go really deep with this. I don't wanna talk just tactics. I wanna talk about the root cause and what you need to think in order to beat this. You may have heard of this next study. After all, it's one of the most famous ones of all time. The study was conducted in the 1960s by Walter Mischel of Stanford University, in which he took groups of children between the ages 3 and 5, and he placed electrodes in their head and they hit a button until they died because they had too much dopamine. That was a joke. They're not the rats, don't worry. He brought the children into a room one by one, and he placed a marshmallow in front of them on the desk. He then informed the kid that, hey, you can eat this marshmallow right now, or if you wait 15 minutes, I'll come back and give you 2 marshmallows. Obviously, 2 marshmallows is a better deal, but man, when you're 3 to 5 years old, 15 minutes feels like 15 hours, doesn't it? Some children ate the marshmallow right away. They said, screw it, I don't want to. I want this right here, right now, instantly. Where others waited for 15 minutes and they got 2. What's fascinating is when they followed the development of the kids that delayed the gratification, waited the 15 minutes, they not only had higher SAT scores, better self-image, healthier relationships, they had lower rates of obesity and drug addiction. Now back to you. understand that to the degree you can delay gratification, that is the secret to getting a lot of what you want in life. After all, building a lasting business that produces you lots of money, that is a massive delayed gratification act. Having a relationship that's healthy, thriving, and fulfills you, that takes years to build that amount of trust with someone. Working on yourself, peeling back the layers, doing the inner work, real lasting growth that makes you feel awesome and alive, that is delaying gratification because it's hard to do the inner work. It's hard to do the things we talk about in videos like this. Metaphorically, we all have marshmallows placed right in front of us. But understand though, if you really want your life to be where it can be, to be what you're capable of, that's going to require you delaying gratification at some level. Which brings us to the fundamental truth and the main points of this video. Let's compare cheap and instant dopamine to real and lasting dopamine. There's an odd truth about life in that things that are bad for us in the long run feel really good for us in the short run. Picture scrolling on social media. Feels awesome when you're doing it. Doesn't feel so good when you look at how much you procrastinated on and the work that still needs to be done. You get stressed out. A lot of the junk food out there is not addicting because it sucks. It's awesome. It feels great. Salt, sugar, fat, all in one combo that they scientifically engineer to make them more addicting. That's why people struggle to stop eating them. But the silver lining for you is that there's another kind of dopamine. It's called real and lasting. That things that are good for you in the long run, they'll actually feel a little bad for you in the short run. Easiest example to illustrate this, going to the gym. It's hard. Some pro bodybuilders, some pro athletes say, like, I don't feel like training. I don't like this. It does not feel good, but I know it's good for me. And I know that I feel 10 times better after I do it. My point here is that our brains aren't very good at thinking long term, yet that's where everything you want in life will come from. So it now becomes more important for you not to go after cheap and instant dopamine and go after real and lasting. And the next time you're about to make a decision, one frame that's really helped me with this has been asking myself, is this good for me in the long run or the short term? Man, if you just ask yourself that one question over and over before you make decisions, your life will look totally different and it will change. Another frame is setting your future self up for success. Phrased another way, you don't do things for the current you do things for the future version of you. The scariest part too about the instant gratification culture is that it raises the bar so high, it's so much dopamine all at once in one setting, that you can no longer enjoy the real thing. That's why porn is so dangerous for a lot of people. In the case of relationships and intimacy with others, it hijacks your neural pathways to pretty soon you can't even get it up with a real woman. Processed foods hijack your taste buds and your dopamine centers to now when you even go to eat the real fruit, the sweetest thing that nature provides, you can't enjoy it because it doesn't taste as good. The good news though is when you stop all the instant gratification behaviors, your brain is amazing. Your body is perfectly designed and it resets, and so that you can enjoy the real thing eventually. Take 90 days off of porn, you can get it up again. Take 90 days off of processed foods. Blueberries taste super sweet. I eat a pint almost every day. Key distinction here is that pleasure doesn't equal happiness. All the cheap dopamine that exists in our modern world is nothing but an illusion. It's not the real thing. The pursuit of pleasure is a soul-sucking pit. And if you know about human behavior, there is something called a hedonic treadmill. I remember when I wanted to get 1,000 subscribers in my mom's basement, I was like, that is the most, holy cow, I got it. Can we get to 10? And you get 10,000 subscribers and then you're like, yeah, this, man, you know, I bet 100 would feel better than this. You get 100 and you're like, well, 500, dude, that would be crazy. Then you get 500 and you're like, maybe if I get to 1 million, maybe that's what I need to feel complete, whole, like successful, all those things. And then I hit 1 million subscribers last year and realized that a lot of the things I was still struggling with are there. The stress I had in my business was still there. It didn't magically go away because the hedonic treadmill spins faster and faster the more you accumulate and the more you get. The secret is not to run faster on the treadmill. The secret is to step off the treadmill altogether and start basing your self-worth and self-love, and that's what I had to do, in things outside of metrics and things that you can adapt to. Another angle on this subject is to learn from others' journeys. How many celebrity stories do you know that reads the same way? I had it all, I got it all, and I still felt like there was something missing inside. That's a cliche for a reason, because pleasure and happiness is not the same thing. The story of the Buddha, I've always found a lot of insights from. He was a prince, living royalty. He had grapes going in his mouth, he had servants, he had a harem of women around him, and he was miserable. So what did he do? He didn't say, I need more of this. He realized what we're talking about. The cheap and instant isn't what makes you truly happy, and that pleasure, fulfillment are two different things. So he isolated himself. He went out into the world and he saw the suffering all around him. People are walking without shoes, people are begging, people don't have a bed to sleep in, which led him to meditate, find the Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths. Buddha went after the real thing. Stoicism teaches this as well. Delaying gratification, not giving in to every single bodily urge that you have, that's what builds character, makes you a man or a woman watching this. Christianity teaches you to live Christ-like, delaying gratification. And if you look at the 7 deadly sins, things like sloth, gluttony, lust, those are ranting against instant gratification, cheap dopamine. So every great school of thought teaches this at some fundamental level. I'm not arguing necessarily for a specific religion of any kind, but I think it's good to have that framework of doing things for your future self and long term. Cool if I give you a visual that has really helped me understand and grasp this entire subject of delaying gratification and the payoff. I want to introduce you to Clark's very unscientific, totally made up chart. We have dopamine over here and we have time down here. The very first one we'll look at is the cheap dopamine, the instant gratification we've been talking about. What does that look like? It looks something like this. You have a huge spike up and then a massive crash. And if you know anything about your neurotransmitters and just your state emotionally, there's actually a dip down lower than baseline after what follows. And that's it. But now let's look at what long-term, long and lasting dopamine could look like. Not as much at the beginning. In fact, it's kind of hard. You might get a few spikes up, right? Eventually you're left up there. You might be thinking, well, obviously, you just explained that to us, but I want to go deeper. I want to tell you another lesson that really, really helped me lean into the delayed gratification camp. And this one is my favorite part. If you know dopamine, it's secreted not mostly at the end, but in the journey and the anticipation of rewards. All along the way. In your life, you have a vacation coming up. Well, if you plan it months in advance, you're looking forward to that for months. You're actually getting a lot of dopamine when you think about the vacation you're going on in 2 months. But what's also fascinating is right here, you just have like this one hit of dopamine, if you call that like 5 points or something. But here you have a hit here, you have hits here, 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 here. If you added up all these hits of dopamine, you would have so much more pleasure than if you just had it one time. And is that if you added up all these points, this right here would outweigh that one hit at the end. In other words, that saying it's the journey, not the destination that you hear over and over and over again is fundamentally true. You get more pleasure from the journey of building your business and the success along the way than when you're just sitting there, you sold your company, you're bored with 2, 3, 5 million bucks, and you're like, now what? And that's why a lot of entrepreneurs go on to not just build one company, but 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because they know that the journey is the most pleasurable part. So the 2 takeaways from this one chart is, first, you get so much pleasure in the anticipation of what you're getting. But the second is that if you added up all the hits of dopamine along the way, along your journey towards becoming your 2.0 self, that would actually give you more pleasure than when you actually arrive. If you rank ordered every single human emotion you could feel on a given day, it would look something like a chart I'll put up right here, where you have peace, love, flow at the top, the states you want to experience. And at the very bottom, you have things like shame, guilt, anger, and fear. Understand that humans are hardwired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. Pain is very uncomfortable. It triggers off our fear centers in our brain, and pleasure feels very good. It at least takes us temporarily out of the negative. When you look at Sigmund Freud's work, he said that humans are always wired to avoid the pain. And so we seek distractions, intoxicants. And so a lot of people are using things like addictions to numb the hardness of life. In fact, this was my story for the last 10 years, probably. I had a borderline drinking issue. And it wasn't necessarily that I was hardcore addicted to it, but I just told myself, like, what if I stop escaping from the emotions that I'm feeling? What if I go for the real thing? What if I play long-term instead of instant gratification here? And so I stopped drinking, abstinence. I abstained from it for 30 days. That was my intention. And I started getting so much growth that by the end of 30 days, I extended it to 90. And now I'm over 400 without a drink of alcohol. And I learned so much through that process of going for the real thing, of delaying gratification, of not giving in to all the instant temptations. Things like real lasting self-growth that I was able to look at myself, why I would need a drink in the first place. Things I thought I had dealt with, self-love issues, self-attacking, being overly critical and judgmental of myself. And through doing that, you're able to start working and shedding off those layers. And guess what? When you start shedding off the real layers instead of escaping from them, that's where your real growth begins. If you're laying in bed at night and you feel lonely, so you go to social media to distract yourself from the loneliness, well, when you put down the phone, the loneliness is still there, isn't it? And so unless you deal with the underlying cause, nothing you do to take yourself out of it instantly is really going to matter and benefit you. And so taking a self-audit of where you are escaping and what you're escaping and running from, until you confront it, it's always going to be there and it's always going to cause you problems. They say the definition of insanity is what? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Well, by definition, that behavior is literally insane. We're all insane a little bit when it comes to the topic of dopamine. Maybe it's just taking a 30-day fast from your indulgence of choice, like I did with alcohol. Or maybe it's just adopting the mindset of setting your future self up for success. Understand though that this problem continues and that, not to be dramatic here, but we are at war with this cheap dopamine issue. It's a war between the childlike version of you who wants the marshmallow right away and the adult rational version of you who knows to delay it and get two down the road. It's a war and a battle between the lower 1.0 you and the evolved 2.0 of where you want to go and who you want to be. Remember that everything you really want in life comes down to thinking long term. So I invite you to go after the real thing. Speaking of going after the real thing, we've been talking a lot about creating a 2.0 version of you. I'll link up right here our guide to identity shifting. This is the best, fastest way I've found to really do that and have it stick. If you are still watching, please drop a like. That really does help us out here on the channel. Subscribe if you're not already. And if you want our help designing this next version of you, going after the real thing, overcoming some of these cheap dopamine behaviors, I'll link down below where you can have a free call with one of our metamorphic coaches. See if we can genuinely help level you up. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time. Stop settling, start living. See ya.